Well, currently, Lower Nicola, we're not involved in the specific claims process. We have had done research over the years, and we know we have some claims that we would like to move forward with. We do have concerns about the the length of the process, the costs relating to the process, and being very bureaucratic and time consuming. And moving forward, what I hope for, and I believe what our community hopes for, is that we can have a process that is a different process moving forward, where it's not as bureaucratic and not as lengthy and not as cumbersome, so we can actually uh, deal with our specific claims and deal with our historical land grievances in a way where government will acknowledge uh, the past, and we can move forward and deal with them in an expeditious way. Well, no, I don't think it works at all. One of the things that, as we know, the government has done is they, and I believe the provincial government as well, is they uh, have adopted the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I think in the spirit of UNDRIP and in the spirit of the calls to action, um, for example, the Crown, federal and provincial, need to do more in terms of acting on those recommendations and adoption of UNDRIP. And the way to do that is to incorporate um, the adoption of UNDRIP, and if we're looking at reconciliation, adopting them specifically in the specific claims process, so we can deal with these issues, and the Crown will actually acknowledge the wrongdoings or the things that they've done in the past, and we can just deal with this in a way that makes sense to everybody. So I'm hopeful that moving forward, we can look at, of course, what the Crown has done or what the government has done, but also look at this issue from the Indigenous perspective and the injustices that have occurred, and and the and the dialogue that took place between the settler governments at the time and the Indigenous peoples, and how we can move forward collectively and acknowledge our Indigenous laws, um, but also, of course, look at it from the government's perspective as well. But we need a process that's inclusive and where we can move this forward in a good, uh, reasonable way. In a real way, and I think Angie could probably speak to this, but when it comes to acknowledging, there shouldn't be any barriers when it comes to, for example, if you go through the Delgamuukw court case or other case law, Indigenous laws are given the same weight as non-Indigenous laws. So there needs to be, we have to make sure that the space is there for, oral histories, the um, the laws that our elders have been carrying on for generations and generations, thousands of years. But we have to create that space so it's given the same amount of weight as non-Indigenous law. So I think if we do that, and obviously as well, we don't have a process where Indigenous peoples or First Nation communities need to prove their claim. I think it's more about just acknowledging what happened. I don't think there's a big dispute in terms of what happened. Our history is our history, but let's look at what we have and then move forward. Yes, of course. I mean, there over the last hundreds of years, there's been a denial of Indigenous laws, and there's been a denial of our people, and that we've lived here for thousands of years, and we have our own Indigenous legal orders and traditions. And the only way to move forward in a way where we can all live here in our rightful place is for Indigenous laws to be recognized. And I think once we do that, um, we'll be able to, come to solution on a lot of these issues, and specifically land-related issues. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's been one of the main issues over, I mean, since Confederation over 150 years, there's been a deliberate process of denying and acknowledging that there is Indigenous laws. So for the process to move forward, I think um, first, Indigenous peoples themselves need to make sure that we come from a place of recognizing our own Indigenous laws, but at the same time, the federal government and the provincial government, or the Crown generally, needs to acknowledge that Indigenous laws have been here for thousands of years, and Indigenous peoples have been here for thousands of years, and we're not going anywhere. I don't think non-Indigenous Canadians are going anywhere, so we need to find a way to work together, acknowledge each other in a respectful way, including our laws. And once we do that, I think the sky's the limit in terms of where we can go.